Hey guys, here today showing you how to replace an AC compressor on a 2000 Lexus GS300. This is the 2JZ VVT-I engine non-turbo. This process will work for this generation GS, which I believe is the second generation GS. It'll also work for the 2001 through 2005 IS300s. It may work for the older 2JZ engine, but pretty much if you have a 2JZ, all the AC compressors sit down on the side, so the process should be pretty similar for all the 2JZ engines. As you can see, it's situated down there in the bottom. You access it from the bottom. There are some things you do here on top, but it will need to come out from the bottom. But up top here, there are some things you can do right away. First thing being is taking off the serpentine belt. I just did a video on replacing the tensioner on this belt, so you need to get if you have the factory tensioner, it is a 14 millimeter nut that'll be right here where I'm pointing at in the middle. You need to get a 14 millimeter nut and a long breaker bar, and or excuse me, a 14 millimeter socket. Then you can go on ahead and loosen this up. So I will go ahead and do that first so you can see how that is done. Okay, so like I said, get yourself a breaker bar and the correct size socket. For you, it should be a 14 millimeter. For me, it's a 15 millimeter socket, so take a picture of the serpentine belt routing, that way you don't forget how to put it back on when you take it off. Pretty much you just stick it on there and push this clockwise, and that'll loosen the tension on the belt so you can take the belt off. Like so. You really don't have to take the whole belt off. You can just take it off the AC compressor pulley, but I'm just going to take mine all the way off just so it's just not in my way. Okay, now I move to showing you what else you can do while you're up top here inside the engine bay. I forgot to mention that I do have the car up, jacked up. That's probably the first thing you should do, actually. Sorry I didn't show you that, but jack up the car, get it on jack stands. And in this particular car, there is a splash shield that holds on, that's attached to the bottom of the car. Down here, there's a splash shield. It's over here on the ground. Obviously, granted, this 2JZ is going to be in a GS or an SC300 or an IS300, so honestly, the splash shield could vary between the cars. Usually it's just held on by a bunch of 10 millimeter screws. If you kind of follow the front of the bumper, you'll find all of them. That way you'll have nice clear access to the AC compressor, which is sitting right there. So, but like I said, while we're up top, we could do a few more things up there, so that way we don't have to go back and forth, top and bottom. Granted, you will have to loosen some of the bolts, but we'll try and just do everything we can up top first. Okay, so back up top here, we'll need to disconnect the two AC lines. Excuse me, this wiring harness is in the way. But if you look straight down here, you'll have one of the AC lines, the high pressure line. It'll be right here. There is a 10 millimeter screw attached to it. Sorry, it's not focusing on it, but that guy right there. And just below that is the low pressure line that also has a 10 millimeter nut. You'll need to loosen and remove both of these, and then you can wiggle the lines loose. Also, there's a wiring harness connector right here. That guy right here, pretty simple. Just push the tab in. You see right there in the middle. You can use a pick, or if you have, you know, skinny fingers, you can push that tab in, and then that connector will just slide backwards. Same for this other one that's down here. It's just push the tab with your thumb and then pull the harness off. There's another one below that as well. This one might be easier to get at from the bottom. However, this connector right here on top is easier to get here on the top. Also, as a segue, when you take off these AC lines, if your car still has Freon in it, it will release a bunch of pressure in this nasty green Freon stuff. So what you should do before even tackling this job is to release or take this to an AC shop and have them vacuum the system, so that way you can be sure that when you crack these lines open, you won't, you know, spray all this stuff in your eyes or all over the place. So I've already done that with this car. I took it to the AC shop yesterday and they vacuumed the system and recovered whatever was in there. So I'm good to go. But just a note, so you will know that stuff will come out if you did not have this system vacuumed. So I'm going to go on ahead. It'd be kind of hard for me to show you exactly how I'm going to get to those bolts, but pretty much I'm just using a very long extension there with a 10mm on it to get to the nuts. And then as far as the connectors are concerned, you can just use your hands to loosen them up. So I'm going to go on ahead and do that now. Okay, I just undid the little top connector. I got one of the bottom connectors undone. I'm going to undo the other one from the bottom. Now I'm just going to take off these two AC lines. It's easier to take them off. Sorry for the wind. It's easier to take them off and with the top one first, and then pull it off, and then pull the bottom one off. So all you got to do is just wiggle them and pull them straight out. They're aluminum though, so be a little gentle with them. So that one is undone. You can just pretty much just hang it off to the side wherever you can out of your way. I'm gonna go ahead and take the bottom one off now. And now that one is loose as well. I'm just going to tuck it off back to the side. Okay, so for now that's pretty much all that we can do up here on the top. We will be back up here to loosen some of the top mounting bolts, but let's go down to the bottom and get that connector undone, and then we can go on ahead and loosen up some of the mounting bolts down there. Okay, so down here at the bottom you'll have obviously the AC compressor is right here. I apologize now ahead of time for focusing issues. It might want to focus on this sway bar right here instead of the compressor. But as you can see, the other electrical connector is just right here, right there. We already undid the top one, and we've already done the other one that's on the top as well. And pretty much the mounting locations for the compressor are this guy right here. It's a 14mm. There's also a 14mm that's right here as well. When you undo this, both of these should come all the way out. And then if you look just back here where the tip of my screwdriver is, right back here, there's another 14mm mounting screw that's just right there on the tip. And then the last one is actually on top of the compressor, and we'll have to get to that one from on top inside the engine bay. That'll probably be the last one I get to, but we'll figure that out actually as we go. It might be easier to do the top one second to last, but nonetheless, you know where they all are at. There's one here, there's one right here, This one, as I was saying before, we may have to undo this whole power steering pump bracket. I believe we'll have to, but we'll get there when we get there. So right now I'm going to take off this electrical connector. Okay, so all the electrical connectors are now removed and gone. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen and remove this screw and this screw right here in the front. Like I said, they are 14 millimeter. Okay, so the top one I have out here. Do remember where they go, because they could be different lengths. Okay, just so you, for your information, these two down here on the bottom are the exact same length, so it shouldn't matter which one goes where. Now, for this bottom one over here, I'm gonna loosen it, but I'm not gonna take it off all the way, because I think I want to take off the top one first, all the way. And that way I can come down here and be able to hold the compressor with my hand while I'm loosening up this bottom bolt. So that way, it'll be kind of difficult to hold up the compressor while you're taking off the top bolt. Since the compressor has to come down from the bottom, it'd be very difficult to do the top bolt last. So I'm gonna go ahead and loosen this one now, and I'll just leave it in place. Okay, so now that we got the bolts done, here comes probably the most rather annoying part of this job, is the wiring harness right here. As you can see, excuse me, this bottom one right here, the top one will stay attached to the compressor, because when you take the compressor off, it'll stay with it. This bottom wiring right here though, sorry it's not focusing on it much, but that bottom wire, this black wire right here, goes and stays attached to the engine or to the car. So that means we're going to have to disconnect this here connector off of this bracket, and it's very challenging. If you look at the side of the bracket though, this metal bracket that's attached to, I don't know if I can get an angle at it, but there is right there, I can't really see it, but there's a Phillips head screw that's holding it on. If you can get a Phillips head screw there, that will help tremendously in being able to take the connector off of the bracket. And you can see up there, it's also attached. It's also attached up here as well, right where my finger's at. Right there, you can get a needle nose pliers behind this thing and pinch the little tab that holds it in, and take it out. Excuse me, it's not focusing, but you can probably see this from the top in the engine bay as well. I do know of guys that just take a flathead screwdriver and just pry this guy off, or take some cutters and just cut them off, which is also a possibility, and then you can re-zip tie it back on. But however you want to take it off, the correct way just would be to pinch the back of this here and pull the connector out. However, like I said, that can be very frustrating. So I am going to try my best to get it off now. I'll try to show you guys how I get it off, but I can't promise I will have a very good angle at it. So but I'll go ahead and try though.
So that's how I got that off. You just pinch these guys right here. See if you can see that. Yeah, these guys right here. You just pinch this on the back of this here bracket and it'll just slide out. Like I said, this other connector stays attached to the compressor, so you don't have to worry about it. So pretty much this same principle right here will work for the, if you follow this wire up, you also need to disconnect it again. That same principle will work for that connector as well. I'll try and see if I can get an angle at that one for you guys. Might be a little bit harder to get at. You can see at the very top of the frame there, that is the connector. The wiring harness goes up there, so I'll try and see if I can get that one off as well. Okay, so I got that one off as well, and I'm just gonna let this dangle here. So now we'll go up to the top where we can loosen up the top mounting bolt. Should also be a 14 millimeter. Okay, so if you're looking right here at the side of the engine, down right above this lower suction hose, you'll see right back there in the back, I don't know if I can get an angle at it, there is one more screw that's back there. You can just see the tip of it back there, right there. That's a 14 millimeter nut. So that you need to loosen that up. You should be able to get to it with probably a 3-inch extension and a 14 millimeter. Should be no problem to get to that. And that is the only one I see that is holding up top. I don't believe there's another one that holds up top. Oh wait, yeah, there is another one up here. There's also one that's right here below the power steering pump pulley. I don't know why it's not focusing on it, but pretty much right there, there's another 14 millimeter as well. Sorry, it's not focusing on that. Trying to get it to focus on it, but you can see it right there. So there's that 14 millimeter as well. So I'm gonna go on ahead and completely take out the one that's underneath the pulley. Then the nut on the other side, I'm gonna go ahead and remove that fully as well. I won't be able to get good angles at these, so I apologize. I'm just gonna do it and I'll be right back with you guys. Okay, so I got the bottom bolt out here. I got the nut taken off the back completely. The last thing you need to do before you can get this compressor free is to remove this power steering pump bracket. If you remember when we first took off the 2 bolts on the bottom, the very top bolt was attached to a gold color bracket that actually locates the bottom of the power steering pump. So if you follow that bracket up, and it's kind of hard to see, but inside here you'll see there's a nut right there on the left. See, as I'm rotating this around, that hole right there, this nut right here is a 14 millimeter nut or bolt. You need to take that out. And then there's also, if you rotate it around the other side, you can see there's another one on this side. You shouldn't have to actually take these all the way out. If you just loosen them up quite a bit, then this bracket that's right back here, that bracket right there will be loose and free, to where right now it's kind of pinching up against the compressor, and that's what's kind of holding it in. So if you loosen these both up, you can just do it with a 14 millimeter and an extension to just fit them both in there. You should have plenty of room to get in here with a ratchet. Just loosen them both up, then that bracket will become loose, and in turn the compressor will be loose. So I should be able to get, you know, at least a video of me loosening these up, and I will do that now. one side loose. I'm just gonna stick the socket in there and continue to loosen it up a little bit more by hand. But like I said, I'm not gonna take it completely out. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and loosen up the other side as well. And I don't know if you can hear that, but the bracket is now loose enough on the front of the compressor to where it shouldn't be stopping you from pulling it out. So let's go back down to the bottom of the car and pull the compressor out. Okay, so the bracket I was talking about is just up here on the top right here. This guy right here is now loose, so it's not putting any pressure on the front of the compressor. We got these two bolts out. We got the bolt up top here in the front out, and we have the nut on the back out. The only bolt that we left is this one right here on the bottom, so that we can unloosen that by hand. And then as we do that, the compressor should, well, it might take a little bit of persuasion, but it should be able to come right out. You will want to be careful with the oil level sensor connector, which is right here, which actually I might actually disconnect that right now just so it's not in the way. It's just a little tab that you push and wiggle it and take it off. This is kind of an old connector, but you see, just like that, it's off. So that, just so that way you don't hit it by accident, and be careful not to hit that sensor as you take it out. So the way I think that this compressor is going to come out is, let me see, I can't zoom out anymore, but you may have to move this, this is a power steering return line, or a pressure line, sorry. You may have to, you know, maneuver the compressor around this some, so you can just, don't go too crazy with this. It is a metal line, it could bend and potentially break, but I'm thinking that the compressor will come out right back behind the sway bar here, not in front of the sway bar, because the radiator and the fans are in the way, so I don't think there's enough room there. Either way, you're gonna have to just kind of maneuver it out of there best as you can. So I'm gonna go ahead and loosen up that last bolt in the back. Okay, like so, that one's out. And just so you know, the back bolt on the bottom is indeed very longer than the front one, so can't get those mixed up. Now, this thing should be loose. Okay, so you have to forgive me. It's been a while since I did one of these. I believe I have to move this power steering reservoir completely out of the way, as there may be another screw that is holding the top of the compressor on. As you see on the bottom, we tried to loosen it up there and take it out, but that didn't work. So if you remember, we loosened up these two bolts here. I'm going to go ahead and loosen and remove these bolts completely, and then I'm going to take the bracket out from behind there. It should just slide out, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then alternatively, or excuse me, not alternatively, but also there is a 14 millimeter screw that's right here that attaches to the top of the power steering pump that may actually be connected to the compressor as well. I'm going to go ahead and remove that guy as well, and see if that doesn't give us some access to get the compressor off. We may have to follow that back. It's just a brace. We may have to follow it back here and loosen up the 14 millimeter that is back here as well. As you can see, this black bar right here, it attaches right there just with the 14 millimeter, and it attaches over here at the 14 millimeter. So I think I'm going to go ahead and remove this one and remove that one, so that way I can see what else is holding the compressor. And I apologize, but we should have this out very shortly. Okay, so I did look it up in the service manual, and this power steering reservoir here that you now see I have loose did indeed need to come off, because if you look just back there in the back, there is one, the bolt that's holding the bottom of the power steering bracket on is just right there in the back, and in order to get to that you had to take this power steering off. As you remember, those two bolts that were in between the power steering pump pulley holes, I pulled those both out, and then this is the bracket that sits behind there. It just falls out. So when you loosen up that bolt there in the back, that guy, as you see, if you can see on the top of it, well, you can't really see from this angle, but on the top of the compressor there is this U-shaped bracket deal. You can't see the back of it because this power steering pump is blocking it, but it is also providing some type of pressure to the front side of the compressor. So as soon as we loosen up that bolt, and you can either you should be able to remove this bracket completely, or at least loosen the bolt to where it releases some of the pressure off the front of the compressor, then we should be able to wiggle it out. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen up that bolt that's right there in the back. Excuse me, I can't get a good angle at it, but it's just right underneath this here piece of metal. It is also a 14 millimeter as well. You're going to have to use an extension to get to it. So I'm going to loosen that up, and then I'll get right back to you guys. Okay, so I've loosened up that bolt there, and now as you can see, as I move this whole bracket, the compressor is now loose as well. So I'm going to remove this, I'm going to remove the bolt completely out of here, and that'll enable me to pull the compressor out. If you can see right down here where it is holding itself into the compressor, see if I can get an angle out there, you can see that this here, that aluminum point that is stuck in here, and this aluminum is part of the compressor, and it's press fit into this here U-shaped. So that's what's holding the compressor in. You probably will have to get a pry bar and stick it in this hole right here. You see that little bit of daylight? Stick it in there and pry the bracket off of the compressor before you try to pull the compressor out, because I believe that there will not be enough room to get the compressor out if you leave that bracket attached. So I think I'm going to get a pry bar, and so you can see the angle I'm looking at here. I'm obviously standing on top here. I think I'm going to get a pry bar from here and go straight down into that hole and try and pry the bracket off of the compressor, so that way I can remove the compressor and leave the bracket inside the car. So I'm going to see if I can get an angle to show you guys. So you can see here that I'm prying that bracket off of the compressor. So there, as you can see, it is now completely free, and I don't even have to remove the bolt entirely from the engine. So I'm going to leave that in there. Okay, so the very last thing you need to do while you're up here, after you've done the power steering pump bracket there and broke that loose like I just showed you, is remove this. If you remember, the very top mounting nut was a 14 millimeter. However, the stud that's in here is very long, so you will not be able to pull the compressor far enough away from the engine
in order to clear this long bolt. So you'll need to remove the stud, and then that will enable you to get the compressor out from the bottom. It uses if you see that the face of it is a star shaped or a Torx, you'll need to use an E10 Torx. Like it won't focus on it, but it's an E10 Torx. It's pretty much like a reverse Torx. It's a female version. You put that on there and take that stud out, and then we can go on ahead and take the compressor out. So I'm going to go ahead and get this guy off.
Okay, last bolt down here is holding this guy in. Just got to loosen him up. Like so, and then we should be able to fish this stuff out of here.
So as you can see here, I ended up having to drop down the power steering reservoir and assembly so that I can actually pull the compressor up out of the engine bay, because it was not going to make it past the sway bar, as you can see here in the video. So you should be able to figure out that on your own, because basically the power steering is already loose already. You just kind of have to maneuver things around a little bit in order to make it work. Okay, so first thing you want to do when you get the old compressor out and before you put the new compressor in is, if obviously there's going to be varying manufacturers of compressors for this car and any car in general, you just want to make sure that the compressor is physically the same, because sometimes they have different variations of them, and you just want to make sure you have the same connectors. As you can see, I bought a brand new Denso. This is about $400, so I know it's going to work, and that's just the way I went about to buy the parts. So it has the correct connector up here, the correct connector down here. It has the metal bracket already on it, as well as the correct studs on it. So some of these compressors for these cars will only have one connector down here and not this connector. They should work still the same, but I just like to buy the OE stuff, that way I know it fits right. And also, some of the compressors will come with new O-rings for the lines. See, this came with 2 new O-rings, a high side and a low side. So if we come back to the car over here, you'll see on the rings here, excuse me, be able to focus, there is an O-ring right here that you can replace. And this one, as well as the other pressure line, which is right here. So I'm going to replace both those O-rings. That way we know we have a good seal. And pretty much we're just installing the compressor back into its place. You have to kind of maneuver it back down into this area. I highly suggest on using the long stud that you pulled out, this here stud, using this thing, sliding it into the compressor and just kind of tightening it by hand. That way the compressor can just hang on this stud while you go down in the bottom and start to hand tight all of the other bolts. So I won't be able to film exactly everything I do. I'll try to get a good angle at it if I can, and forgive me for it's obviously a different time of day now, and there may be shadows involved, so I'll try my best to get you guys at a good angle. Okay, just so you can see how I have this rigged up temporarily, I took and zip tied the power steering pump here to the
upper radiator line, just to hold it up out of the way, because obviously there's nothing holding it up now and it was just hanging down in my way. I fished the compressor down in there. Now it's just kind of just sitting there temporarily. What I'm going to do now is you see how you have the long stud here that slides into the top part, remember, with the nut on the back. What I'm going to do now is go on the bottom of the car. I'm going to hold the compressor up with my hand, and I'm going to start the very far back bolt by hand. That way I can, you know, have a good starting point, and I don't have to try and hold it all up here. So I'm going to go down to the bottom and start that one bolt by hand. That way I can have something holding it up. So you see I got that one installed. Then I'm going to go on ahead and get this front lower bolt right here installed as well. So that way I know that the compressor will be supported here on the bottom while I go up to the top and, you know, reinstall the power steering pump, reinstall the bracket. So you can see I got this one started by hand, this one started by hand. I'll go ahead and tighten them up just a little bit so I know that they're mostly secure. You don't have to tighten them all the way, but just make sure you get them in there, you know, get a few threads in there so it doesn't fall out by accident. And then you can also reconnect this oil level sensor as well, since you're here. Like so. Then we'll go back up to the top so we can install everything up top. Okay, so now I'm back up top. What we need to focus on doing, like I said, I apologize for the camera angles here and the lighting, but what we need to focus on doing now, here, let me see if I can help the situation, is now we're going to take the long screw, this guy, and it goes right there into that hole in the back. You could just start it in by hand if you can get it down in the hole there, and try and start it by hand just so you make sure that it's threading in. It may take a little bit of maneuvering to get it down in there, but you should be able to get it started by hand. And then after that we can go on ahead and put the there we go. See if I can get my socket on that to start that. Get my ratchet real quick. Just bear with me for 1 second. Last thing you want to do is cross threading any of this. So this guy, remember, you use the E10 Torx, and you can thread this all the way in until it bottoms out, or pretty much until it stops. Okay, so you don't need to tighten this up very much, just to get it snug like so, and that'll be it for that. Before you put the nut on here, because remember it's just a 14mm nut that goes onto that, I will just go on ahead and tighten it on by hand now, just so I know it's there and I know that's where it belongs at. But I am not going to tighten it, I'm just going to leave it on by hand. So, okay, now that we've got the compressor kind of into place where we need it to be, we need to put this main bracket back on that locates the top of the power steering pump. If you remember, it kind of just mounts to the side of the motor, just right above the power steering pump. So we can go on ahead and put this on. I apologize, you might not be able to see this exactly, but you kind of get the idea of where it sits at. Okay, I got that bracket into place. As you can tell, it is this bracket here. It's a U-shaped bracket. It gets bolted in with one bolt that goes straight back. We took it off earlier in the video in order to get the top of the compressor loose. It's the one that you had to use a flathead screwdriver to kind of pry it out of its holder. But I'm going to tighten up the one bolt that's holding it on, and the other part that comes down and sits on top of the compressor, you may have to kind of persuade that to slide into place, but I'm gonna go ahead and tighten up that bolt now. Okay, so got that guy tightened up. So now the power steering pump just slides down into this bracket like so, and probably just slide that down in there like that, and then you'll take this bracket and, like I said, slide it down on top of the bolt, the main bolt that holds the top of the AC compressor on. Slide that down on top, and then these two bolt holes should line up through the pulleys here. So it's going to take a little bit of finesse, but you should be able to get it. Got it set on there right now. Now I'm going to try and just line up these bolt holes with the pulley. Okay, got the right one in there now. Okay, so I got one side started, the other side should be easy to start. Okay, since we're over here now on this side, don't forget to connect the connector to the top of the, connect the connectors, all the electrical connectors to the back to the AC compressor. They should stand out, and you should know exactly which ones they are and where they go. Working on a GS300, don't forget to reconnect the vacuum lines here for the power steering pump pressure sensor. Okay, like so. Don't forget to put the ECU little cooler line back, or excuse me, like vent line back on. Should just pop into place like so. Now that back nut that's on the back on the top, I'm going to go on ahead and fully tighten that down now that everything is in place. Like so. We can go on ahead and reattach the AC lines. Actually, I think before I do the AC lines, I think I'm going to go back to the bottom and tighten up the very far back bolt on the bottom, and then there's also the two that are in the front. So I'm not going to show you how to do those. They should be pretty self-explanatory. Just got to tighten them up, and that's all. Okay, we got all of those on and tight now. Now pretty much the only thing left to do is to reattach the two AC lines, the pressure line and the low side line, the suction line. That's pretty self-explanatory. All you gotta do is, most of these compressors come with caps on them. Just take the nuts off and remove the plastic cap that's holding them on, and then reinstall the lines back into place. Aside from that, we can go on ahead and put the serpentine belt back on, which I'm going to do now. If you took a picture of your belt routing, go on ahead and refer to that now. And then remember, you just get a breaker bar and get, not on this pulley I'm pointing at, but down on the tensioner pulley, which is right here below that. There'll be a 14 millimeter socket that you'll need if you have the factory tensioner. This is not a factory tensioner, so this one so happens to be a 15 millimeter socket that I need. But we can go on ahead and route the belt and put the belt back on using the breaker bar. And grab the belt. And for me personally, I like to put the water pump pulley on last, so I will route everything else around how it's supposed to go. Everything on that I need to have on, and I'm sorry, not the water pump, but the alternator is the last pulley I like to put everything on. So I'll grab my tool here, get it situated into place, and you remember you're going clockwise as you're looking at the engine. So just push it clockwise, and then you should be able to feed the belt over the last pulley. Make sure you get everything mostly straight. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Like I said, I apologize for obviously the change in day and the lighting and whatnot. As I said in the beginning of the video, this was the wrong compressor and I couldn't use it, and it took pretty much a whole day for them to get a new one in. So beside that, everything else went in pretty smoothly. This is a job that probably will take you about, I'd say probably about an hour if you get it done pretty quickly. It shouldn't be too hard, maybe an hour and a half if it's your first time, but it's totally something you can do at home. If you take this to the shop, they're probably going to charge you about $1,200, maybe $1,000 to replace this. So if you want to just get a compressor and do it yourself, it's totally possible. So if you guys have any comments or questions, just leave them in the comment section below. First time to the channel, as always, I appreciate you guys stopping by and checking out the channel. We're slowly growing, and I appreciate your guys' support. If you would just do me a solid and hit the like button, share it with your friends, and hit the subscribe button on your way out, I really appreciate it. All right, I'll catch you guys next time.